Elevator maintenance folks, what is the weirdest thing you have found at the bottom of the elevator chamber? I once accidentally lost my driver's license down the little gap in the elevator doors, just dropped it and was super unlucky as it slipped through. It turned up in my mail 10 years later. Obviously long expired, but still crazy some maintenance guy found it and bothered retuning it. Got pulled over once, handed the PO my license and he dropped it in the crack where the window would have been. We looked at each other for a second, he says good luck and walked away. That's pretty neat. Well over 1,500 tax returns at the bottom of the Arto's North Brisbane office elevator shaft. Bloody hell. Were you sent there to retrieve them, or did some drongo just loose them and thought no one will find them anyway? Also, were they tax/NIGOF printouts, or the old paper submitted ones? So that's where Clive Palmer puts them. Worked at a hotel. Guest dropped their phone down the shaft. After a few failed retrieval efforts, we called the elevator guys. They went down, got the phone and also found a carton of eggs. Rotten, but not cracked. I don't even understand how that could happen accidentally. Because it was no accident. I work in tech now, but while I was in college I helped an HVAC guy and he once had me put a carton of fresh eggs in the duct of a client's office that had stiffed him before. When I asked him why I was doing this, he said if this motherfucker doesn't pay up, he's going to have a new issue. But then the guy paid 2 days later and I was sent to retrieve the eggs. He called it his 99-cent insurance policy. Did home repair to help put myself through college. Get a call that there's a non-wastewater leak in an apartment in a second-floor bathroom from a landlord, so me and my co-worker go over. The water line on the toilet has a leak, enough has come out that we need to remove some of the ceiling in the living room to replace it. So we cut out a 4x4 area that meets a ceiling joist and we find an egg. One single egg balanced on the ceiling joist. We gingerly removed it and tossed it out. The ceiling had been closed up for at least the last 40 years. It was lath and plaster, that old. That egg still haunts me. My dad has a great story about this. He supervised the mechanics, and one of them called him from a mental hospital and said, "You've got to see this." The maintenance guy was called because the elevator wasn't quite sitting level on the ground floor, it was about half an inch too high and both patients and staff had been tripping on it. But all other floors were no problem. My dad arrived to find the maintenance guy cackling, looking into the bottom of the shaft. There were probably tens of thousands of magazines down there. They had to get a bunch of shovels, a small crew, and a rolling dumpster to clear it out. When it was all done, my dad decided to stay behind and pretend to read a newspaper while he sat in the lobby. After about half an hour, he sees an elderly patient holding a magazine, shuffling slowly toward the elevator. He stops in front of the doors, glances left, glances right, and quickly stoops down, slides the magazine into the gap, and shuffles away as fast as he can with a huge grin on his face. My dad could not help but laugh hysterically. This guy had probably been sliding magazines in there multiple times per day, every day, for decades. I should ask him whether he reported it or let the guy have his fun. Wouldn't surprise me if my dad went with the latter. 10,000 magazines? Wow, this guy sure must have had a lot of time. As a psychiatrist, I've become fairly desensitized to weird patient actions, but I appreciate this story for how long this patient was doing this. Usually the passive-aggressive stuff goes away quickly, but this man sounds resilient AF. Imagine what he could have done without getting served a bad genetic hand. Our team dropped a steel anal dilator down the dumbwaiter shaft by mistake. When the technician came down and grabbed it off the floor, he'll never forget the look on his face when I told him we need that up here, it's got to go in someone's ass soon. It was priceless. I am a technician for a hospital, dealing with rectal surgical tools is very normal. How many purple dildos have you found in your patients? That poor dilator. It got away for a minute, thought it was finally leaving that wretched life behind, next thing it knows it's lying at the bottom of a filthy dumbwaiter shaft. And just when it's starting to get used to that, thinking not much of a view but a lot roomier than I'm used to, along comes the elevator tech and it's back to the old day in, day out. It must gave done something really bad in a previous life. I bet it was Roy Cohn. One time, we were doing a rip out at an old factory. They were gutting them and turning them into luxury apartments. The elevator we were taking out was a shitty old freight that hadn't run in years. When we finally ran it up, we went down to inspect the pit. It smelled like a dead body had chilled there for half a century. The bottom floor wasn't lit, so I shined my flashlight under the elevator and the whole floor started moving. Roaches. Nasty. Haven't really found anything fun though. I've cleaned out more pits than I could count too. I gave my mom a cheap ring I found. Found a pair of underwear at a hotel. Found a full packet at a courthouse of some lady's case transcribed. Oh, I was on a mod once and one of the hoistway doors had an advertisement sticker for a tennis-free stringing service. Which was weird because it was somewhere only an elevator guy should be able to reach. I called the number, but it was out of service. I've found some cool graffiti from the 40s. That's about it. I worked on escalators for a year and a half. There was a lot more in those pits. I was taking home bent up quarters every day. There was lots of shoe bits and I was always nervous of coming across used needles in certain units. When I read doing a rip out at an old factory, I was picturing a bunch of urban explorers gathered round the bong in the dark. I'm curious, what did the graffiti from the 40s include? This question should be my jam, but unfortunately I've never found anything interesting. $2 coin once, a dime bag of some unknown drug, plenty of syringes, or sets of keys. It's mostly just people's junk mail and empty chip bags down there. I had a co-worker who was opening a candy bar and dropped it down the shaft by accident. Hopefully the building's rats were able to enjoy it. Sounds like the unknown drug would be interesting. Bundle of Watchman Watchtower magazines, Jehovah's Witnesses pamphlets, wrapped in duct tape. Inside it was a Rossi .44 special revolver and a screwdriver. Some Jehovah's Witness was sick of having doors closed in his face. Wow. Can you tell us more? Was it loaded? Did you give it to police? Did they say if it had been used in a crime? Not a technician, but do work at a large hotel. A few years ago one of our elevators stopped working. Turned out when they opened it up they found a 3-foot pile of guest folios that were never delivered to the rooms. Later when we looked on the camera we found it was a security guard that got tired of delivering them to the rooms and instead dropped them down the elevator shaft. He did this for months until he was caught. Guest folios? While I admire the work ethic, you'd think by the time you walked into the elevator you're already halfway there. Unless this is one of those giant hotels in Vegas where the elevator and a room can be a mile apart. Looking at you, grand. My dad was an elevator mechanic for about 15 years. He had a very dark sense of humor and would come home with some of the craziest stories. For example, anytime he was in an elevator, he would shake it a little or tap on the displays or buttons and go, "Yep. Total piece of crap. Inferior piece of crap." And I think he mostly did it to freak people out. One of my favorites, he got a call that someone was hearing weird noises from the elevator. He got inside, rode the elevator up and sure enough, he could hear it too. For half a second he thought it was a baby crying and realized it was a cat. When he got to a certain floor, he could hear this sad meowing. It obviously wasn't in the elevator car, so he got into the shaft and found this little orange kitty. It had somehow, and I don't think he figured out or told us how, got into the elevator shaft and was sitting in a spot between the floors where it wouldn't get crushed by the elevator, but it couldn't get out. My dad saved it and gave it to the building manager to see if it belonged to anyone in the building. It was the one time he ever told us a story that involved him saving an animal instead of finding dead ones. And I don't think he figured out or told us how. Cats are made of liquid, and I am pretty serious. They have a lot of floof and fit through cracks and crevices much smaller than you think should be possible. I'm so happy he helped that poor kitty. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.